Throughout the day, we will learn a lot about how to shape growth in our company. And I'm very pleased to invite here today Timothy, who is the founder of Grow, 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 who is an alumni of 500 Startups and Seed Camp, and who will teach us how to shape growth as a process. Timothy, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. It is a pleasure to be here. As I assume you all know, I am here to talk about growth. Specifically, how to make growth happen at your startup. The keys to achieving this are, I'm going to read this out, understanding that we are a startup, deciding what we want to grow, getting the right team in place, and ruthlessly prioritizing those things that will make growth happen. I'm going to take you through each of these. We're going to start quite theoretical, but we will end up talking about practicalities of things that you can and should do on a weekly basis to make growth happen. You'll also see that there are some worksheets around. We are going to work through these throughout the talk to help illustrate some of the points that I'm trying to make. Before we get into that, I'll give you a little introduction to who I am. I did a computer science degree. My career started with a real job doing programming. I vividly remember on that first day sitting there and thinking, wow, so this is it for the next 30 years, sitting in an office doing work for somebody else. Needless to say, that job didn't last too long. I quickly decided that I would start an agency because obviously I knew how to program, and so I knew how to run a business doing programming. That was obviously completely untrue, and so began my education in business. From there, I had my agency hired by a startup that took me to America. I was very interested and excited about startups by this point, and we went down the traditional startup route. We were in Silicon Valley, we raised a bunch of money, we grew a lot, and it's from this period in my life where a lot of these lessons have come from. Much like many startups, we were struggling with growth, and we also went through this period where the leadership of the startup, for personal reasons, this included me, couldn't be there for some time. And during this period, a lot of really good work happened by everybody, but it diverged. People were working on their own visions. And this got us thinking, why was it not clear to everybody else what the goals were, where we were heading, what we needed to do to hit those goals, and what that meant on a day-to-day basis? And we had some very good investors, people that either were or could connect us with people that ran the growth teams at Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or Quora, etc. And we spoke to those people and got their advice and iterated on our process and built a lot of what I am going to describe to you. I should also say that I've got a startup that I have as well as doing this growth lab, growth consultancy. We are an ISP in the UK that I've recently started. But before I get into the growth stuff, I'd like to know a little bit about you guys. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, and hopefully you can raise your hands to let me know who I'm speaking to. So who here works at or has founded a startup? Cool. And raise your hand if that does not apply to you. Who does not work at a startup? Okay, a few of you. All right. And so for those of you that do work at a startup, what stage is your startup at? Raise your hand if it's seed or earlier. Okay. And what about if you are Series A, Series B sort of stage? Okay, a few, and Series C and later? Okay. And last question I'm interested in the roles that you guys have at your startup. Hands up, who is a founder? Okay, bunch of you, that's great. Who works in marketing? Couple. Product? Yeah, everything. Yeah, totally get it. And what about other roles that I've not mentioned? Okay, thank you. That helps me out a bit. And this is Growth Lab. It's called Grow, Grow, Grow. Does exactly what it says on the tin. We make startups and scale-ups grow. Okay, so we are all here because we want to grow our startup, right? But what does that actually mean? What is growth? Even what is a startup? Let's define some terms. This, as hopefully you can imagine, I spend a lot of time thinking about. Growth is actually an incredibly ambiguous term. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. I've even been in meetings where the same person has used the word growth twice in one sentence to mean different things. I ban it at a lot of the startups that I work with because ultimately it ends up not meaning anything. So growth is a tricky term to pin down. I am going to have a stab at a definition, but before I do, I want to get one thing straight. Growth is not marketing, okay? So if growth is not marketing, then what is it? And the answer to that question is it could be anything. Let's illustrate. So say we run a SaaS invoicing company. Oh, that slide's a bit messed up. And each month we have 1,000 customers land on our website, and of those we get 450 to sign up for a trial. From there, 200 subscribe, and after month 1, we end up with 80 customers who have not churned and love our product. And our goal is to grow our revenue from new customers by 2x. How can we do this? Well, here's an option. We could double the rate of people landing on our website and signing up for a trial. All other conversion rates staying the same, we end up with double the number of users that we've retained after month 1, and so double our revenue from new users. How else could we do this? Well, we could just work on reducing that churn rate. If we halve the churn rate, we get exactly the same result, everything else staying the same. We can double the conversion rate at every step of the funnel and end up with the same result. We could even just double the price and everything staying the same. We've doubled our revenue from new customers. So with this in mind, what is growth? Growth is anything that moves us towards our goal. Right. Next question. What is a startup? Here I am going to enlist the help of startup OG, Mr. Steve Blank, and he says, a startup is a temporary organization designed to search for a repeatable and scalable business model. The important word here is search. A startup is an organization that needs to be optimized for search, for finding out things that we do not know, not one that is optimized for execution or making money. So continuing with Mr. Blank's idea, let's define a business. I like to define a business as an organization designed to execute a repeatable and scalable business model. All makes good sense, right? The startup finds that model, and then a business executes that model. This theory is all very nice, but I'm hoping that some of you in the audience are thinking, well, by these definitions, I am not quite a startup because I know some of the things about my business model, but equally, I am not quite a business because I don't know everything. And actually, that is spot on because it's a continuum. Sadly, it is a rare occurrence that when we are working on our startup, we wake up in the middle of the night and suddenly realize we've got the answer to every single question that we have been working on. It is a slow process. It is super gradual. Maybe you're running experiments to figure out how to acquire customers, and you find that you can do it by publishing related content on your blog, or your search engine marketing is beginning to bear fruit, or your enterprise sales pipeline is really starting to work. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. The point is that you've made a discovery. You found one small piece of the puzzle, and you want to start doing that thing on repeat. Probably you hire someone to execute on that thing. And congratulations. You just took another small step towards becoming a business. Even at the extremes of this continuum, we tend not to be pure startup or pure business. Even the earliest stage startup with 2 people sitting in a room writing code, they're doing something on repeat, even if it's just paying the electricity bill. And at the other end, even the biggest business that's taking a small step into the unknown in terms of their model, they're acting in some ways like a startup, even if they're doing it very badly, which, let's be honest, they almost certainly are. So now that we have a definition for growth, anything that moves us towards our goal, and we have a definition for startups, an organization for searching for a repeatable and scalable business model, can we join these together and get a definition of growth for startups? And I think we can. Growth for startups is anything that moves us towards our goal of defining and creating a scalable and repeatable business model. In other words, it's systematically turning unknowns into knowns. But this can give us a new problem. Because typically at startups, there is an awful lot that we don't know. Early stage, that might be questions like, do people even want our product? Or how can we convince people that they should solve a problem that they didn't even know they had? And later stage, maybe we're talking about, how do we launch in a new city or continent? Or should we start going after enterprise instead of SME? Whatever it might be. The answer to this is all about prioritization. That's the promised land that we need to get to. But before that, we need something we can prioritize against, and that is goals. If you take only one thing from this talk, let it be this: set great goals. Don't rush in, like stew on them, think about them in the shower, spend time capturing the nuance of what it is that you're trying to achieve, not just something in the right direction. I want to be super clear. No goals equals no achievement. Like it says, without clear and actionable goals, you can run as fast as you like, but you'll end up in the wrong place. This seems fairly self-evident, but I speak to an awful lot of startups, and whenever I do, I ask them, one of the first questions is, what are your goals as a founder? And it's surprisingly rare how often they have this stuff figured out. There's a startup that I have spoken with, and I spoke to one founder and asked them this question, and they said, well, what I want to do is sell for £20 million in 3 years' time. And I was thinking, fine, that's a good goal. The market makes sense. It's all good. And then I spoke to the other founder, and they said, I want to sell for £200 million in 5 years' time. So these two founders hadn't had this conversation properly, and as a result, they were actively working against one another in every small decision that they make every day. There's another founder that I am good friends with, and he wants to sell for £50 million. And that's great. He's very precise about that, except, as we all know, sometimes working in startups can be quite stressful. And when that happens, he suddenly realizes that actually he doesn't really want to sell for £50 million. He'd just like to work 2 or 3 days a week and take home a great salary. In this situation, best case, he's working against himself. And worst case, he's actively sabotaging himself because one day he's working against the things that he decided to do the day before. Working on a startup is undoubtedly a journey. And in any journey, velocity is important, but direction is everything. If you're going very slow, eventually, one day you will reach the destination. But if you're going in the wrong direction, you never will. Which neatly brings us to what I like to call the North Star. These are the highest level of goals that I like to talk about at a startup. Doing this well is a huge topic and very difficult, but I'm going to give a few pointers. Your North Star can be derived from 2 things, your mission and your non-negotiables. Your mission is the reason that you founded your startup, or the reason that the startup you work for was founded. It's the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning, the problem that you're trying to solve. The non-negotiables, these things are different per company, but they tend to be on a theme. Or 3 themes, actually. The first theme is doing something you're passionate about. Second one tends to be about money, how much do you want to sell for and when, or how much do you want to earn along the way. And the third common one is doing good for the world. I like the name non-negotiables because it obviously says that we've put these things in a box and we're not going to debate them. But what it also implies is that everything else is up for debate. It's the pivot point that we're going to move around while we're figuring out how to hit these things. So I've got an example. It's my imaginary company called beancounters.com. The mission is to reduce stress from chasing invoices. Non-negotiable number 1 is that we're going to build a SaaS invoicing company. Number 2 is we're going to sell for $50 million in 5 years, or at least that's the goal. And number 3, we want to maintain work-life balance throughout. There's a couple of important points here that I want to draw out. Number 1 is that we need to include things that are implicit. And so we might feel like, well, obviously, we're a tech startup, and so of course it's going to be a SaaS company. But if we don't include non-negotiable number 1, we can hit everything else on that list by starting an at-seat massage company that will give people massages while they're chasing invoices. That hits everything else. It'll reduce the stress, It could sell for that amount if we're really successful, and we can certainly maintain work-life balance. Next point is the money. It's a direct trade-off in terms of risk, how big and how short you make that timeline. It's a good idea to have a serious conversation with yourself about what you would be comfortable with. Because the longer you can push it out and the smaller you can make that amount of money, the higher chance you've got of being successful. And this is not to say that you shouldn't go after that $1 billion valuation, because if that's what you really want to do, then sure, go for it. But what I am saying is do that with your eyes open. That's a lot harder than something a lot less ambitious. Final point here is these non-negotiables can be anything you want as a founder. This company only exists to hit your goals. So put in here whatever you want to. So let's take a look at the Startup North Star worksheet. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to write your mission and non-negotiables in that mission box. We've also got a 3 to 5 year box there. That's important because if your vision, your mission is super far out, we need to constrain it into something that we can think about in the shorter term. I am going to give you a couple of minutes to do that. I should say, by the way, if you are not a founder, if you feel like you can write these things for the entire company, then definitely do that. But you can also write it for the things that you do have control over, your domain. The same thing still applies. Okay, give you a few more seconds to finish that off. So now we've got our North Star. We should be able to work backwards from there to figure out what are the major things we have to do along the way. This conversation can take a long time. I have spent weeks working with clients just on this idea before we even push any further. Fortunately, however, there is a shortcut that we can take for the purposes of this example, and which actually also applies in real life, because most startups have one thing in common, and it's this question: how are we not going to run out of money? In most cases, the question that we are asking ourselves is, what do we think we need to prove so that we can raise our next round? But there's a related question that also makes sense, and that is, what do we think we need to get to profitability? And so back to our example, I'll give you a bit more detail here. Bean Counters is a SaaS company. We have enterprise clients. We've got a trial project going on with Barclays, and we're currently doing 1 million ARR. We spoke to our investors, and they have suggested that what we need to get to our next round is to get to 4 million ARR and diversify out of enterprise sales. So we're going to start selling to SMEs. And so I'm going to give you a couple more minutes now to go back to your worksheet and fill in the before we burn our current cash section. What do you think you need to do to get that next round or get to profitability? All right. Back then to our example. I've written up some goals coming from what our investors told us we need to achieve in order to raise that B round. They are ramp up enterprise sales to 2 million ARR and build SME sales operation to 2 million ARR by December 2019 and sign up 200K worth of SMEs by January 2019. These are not good goals. I've written them like this so we can tease out some nuance of what a good goal might look like. The reason they're so bad is that selling to SMEs and selling to enterprise is very different. One of them we know a lot about, we're already doing it. The other one we haven't even started. So we have no idea whether the exact same product is going to work for SMEs. We have no idea if we can sell it using the same sort of language. We don't know if we're going to need to do sales or we can have a self-service website. We don't even know how much we're going to sell it for. The important thing is not selling to SMEs. The important thing is learning how to sell to SMEs. There's a good example of this of a startup that I know. They are fairly successful in a few cities around the UK, where when they started, it just worked. They're not really sure why, but it happened. And then they were like, well, if we want to go anywhere, we need to take off in London. And so they set this goal of being successful in London. And they spent hundreds of thousands of pounds on ads alone trying to hit this goal. And they were not successful. And the reason is they shouldn't be saying, let's be successful in London. They should be saying, let's learn how to be successful in London. Or to go even broader, let's learn how to launch in a new city and define that playbook. So let's have another go at some goals. Before I dive in here, some of you will notice I've got some OKR, objectives and key results terminology. For the purposes of this talk, I'm going to ignore that because that is a rabbit hole in and of itself. Suffice to say, I like OKRs, I think they're great, but a lot of the acknowledged wisdom applies to businesses, not to startups. And so for now, we can just think of them as goals with precise criteria of when they have been achieved or not. So let's read them out. Number 1, learn how to sell the product to SMEs at scale. Key result, discover what is needed to get to 2 million ARR from SMEs. With some questions, will we need to use the sales team or will self-serve work? Key result number 2, sales and marketing playbook for SMEs. We need to develop that. And number 3, understand unique product requirements for SMEs. And then we have a second goal of ramp up enterprise sales to £2 million ARR. Note that these goals are numbered. These are rankings. We always rank our goals. If we don't rank our goals, we don't know what the most important thing for us to be doing is. On rare occasions, you might find that you have equal priority. Do everything you can to avoid this, because usually it's a fallacy, it's not true. In there somewhere, one of them is more important. So back to the worksheet. Let's write 3 to 5 prioritized goals of what you think you need to raise your next round or to get to profitability. Okay, I'm going to move on as some of you finish doing that. So we have some super specific, well thought through goals. Now what? Well, now we need to get our team to start working on those goals. But before we do that, let's have a look at how we should be structuring that team. Traditionally, businesses organize themselves into a hierarchical structure like this. This makes an awful lot of sense if we are executing a business model. We broadly know what we're trying to achieve, and we know what kinds of people we need to achieve it, and we know how many of those people approximately we need. We organize those people into departments, so we might have a software engineering department and a marketing department and a sales and whatever else you might need depending on what your business is. And those departments are organized around goals. And the marketing team is very good at publishing ads, and the engineering team is very good at releasing high-quality, beautiful features. But in startups, we need to optimize for searching, not for executing. What, for example, if we decide or discover that we need to learn how to acquire customers? That's the most important thing that our company can be doing. That's great for the marketing department, but what does the engineering department do? They just sit there, carry on releasing features. The problem is that prioritization happens within the departments around this goal. But this doesn't work for startups. We need to be able to prioritize across departments. So the ideal structure, wrong way, for a startup looks more like this. Oh, that's a bit low qual, but you get the picture. The ideal structure is about cross-functional teams. So instead of organizing here around goals, our goals are up here, and we organize around projects designed to hit these goals. And you'll see we have members of each department working on a project to hit the goal. In this structure, we are able to prioritize across the entire company. And so if the most important thing for us to be doing is learning how to acquire customers, well, we can get all the resources we need from everywhere to be able to do that efficiently. Working in this way is super flexible. There's a really good example of this from my last startup when we were in San Francisco, and we were signing up sports leagues, amateur sports leagues, and we thought the best model to do that would be a self-service model, so we built a beautiful sign-up flow to test this out, and we put Jack, our lead JavaScript developer, in charge of this project. That makes sense because he was the one that knew most about that flow and could iterate on it, etc. And in doing this, he almost by accident found out that if he made a phone call to the people that we were trying to sign up, they were much more likely to get to the end of that flow and become a customer. And so, being a good, inquisitive sort of guy, he was like, well, what if I make another phone call? And if you keep going down this road, then where do you end up? Well, you end up with a traditional sales funnel. And Jack, then, our lead JavaScript developer, read all the sales books, built our sales team, and achieved the goal, because the goal was not about improving that sign-up flow as it would have been if we were organized by departments. The goal was signing up those sports leagues, which he did. So, as discussed, very few startups are pure startups, and very few businesses are pure business. Even the earliest stage of startups has to pay salaries, pay rent, etc., etc. But hopefully, we're also maybe doing some customer support, or we are executing on a couple of parts of our business model that we figured out. And those things that we do on repeat, I call business as usual. The growth team does not concern themselves with those things. We just want them to be executed. And what is the best structure when we just want to execute something? It's this business structure. And so if we follow the life cycle of a startup, we should start being organized much like this. And then we figure some stuff out and just want to execute it. And so we hire a person to do that execution. And so we look mostly like this, and we have a small hierarchical structure sitting off the side. And then time continues to pass, and we figure some more stuff out. And so we hire some more people. And over time, this continues until we wake up one day and find that we are not a startup with a small BAU team hanging off the side, but we are a huge hierarchical business with a small growth team hanging off the side. This is where we want to get to. And if you achieve that goal, then, well done, go and IPO or something like that. We often at this point get the question, who are the ideal people to have in your growth team and where to find them? I'm going to answer the second part of that question first because it's much easier. The answer is I don't know where to find them. If you find a repeatable source, please let me know. The first part, who are they? The answer to that is they are ideally founders, but you probably can't employ them. The people I go after, I tend to describe as future founders. They're those super flexible people that are happy to work on anything, like Jack, who was a software guy but built our sales team, happy to get stuck in anywhere. There's a really good analogy that I once heard at a talk, so I'm going to shamelessly steal it and use it myself now. And that is, if you think about the founding of a town, and when that first happens, it probably starts with some homesteaders who have decided that they want to go and live in some beautiful valley. So they hitch up their wagons to their horses and they head out into the countryside until they find a beautiful spot and they build themselves a shack. And their cattle just roam around and they have a great life, just getting stuck in, doing whatever they need to do. And then time passes and people hear about this beautiful valley where people live. And so gradually people start to move there. But these people are not the kind of people that are just willing to go and set up camp in some valley somewhere. They want a bit of structure. And so they put up fences and say, well, this bit of land is mine and you can't graze your cattle here because this is mine. And the homesteaders think, well, this is not what I signed up for. And they hitch their wagon back up to their horses and they head off to the next valley to live in the way that they want to live. And time continues to pass. And then more people arrive. And now the town's starting to get quite big. And the town planners turn up and say, well, this needs some structure. And they tell people, you can't build your house here because this area is zoned for industrial. Residential's over there. And the settlers think, well, that's not for me. And they, in turn, leave and head off somewhere else. And this is much like building a startup. The people that you need at the start are very likely to be very different to the people that you need at the end. And if you find that the people at the start that used to be your key employees decide to leave, that is okay, because your business or your startup has changed. And that's the goal. Okay. So moving on, we are almost at the promised land of prioritization. But before we get there, I'm going to briefly talk about projects. Projects are the thing that we will be prioritizing. And then we will practically get into how we do that prioritization. I'm going to read this out because I think it's quite important. A project is a multidisciplinary unit of work that has a specific goal which directly relates back to one or more company goals. I'm going to read that again. A project is a multidisciplinary unit of work that has a specific goal which directly relates back to one or more company goals. It can be large or small, any stage of the funnel, discovery or delivery. By that, I mean a discovery project is a project that you undertake to find out a piece of information. A delivery project is a project you undertake because you have found out some information and you want to build that thing for real and actually execute. Projects have one owner. That person is responsible for that project. They don't have to do all the work, but they do have to make sure that work gets done. Anybody that works on that project works for them, even if it's a CEO, and that project owner has ultimate decision-making power. The project is not complete until it has been launched. For a discovery project, that includes understanding and drawing conclusions from our results. And for a delivery project, that includes actually launching the thing. And so if that means putting out blog posts or doing PR or whatever is required, maybe support articles, that is included. A project covers from inception to it being fully complete. Remember, we are cross-functional teams, and these are multidisciplinary projects. So going back to our example, here are some bean counters projects. Will SMEs pay £50 per user per month? Does publishing accountancy content generate SME traffic? Are current features enough to start signing up SMEs? Does the trial period increase conversion versus a freemium model? And does emailing inactive users reduce churn? These are all relating to that first highest priority goal, and they're all discovery projects, which totally makes sense because that goal is about learning. For any goal, there are a million projects that we could work on. The problem is rarely deciding what projects we could work on. It's deciding which ones we actually should work on. I think there is a good argument that says the real key to growth beyond goals is effective prioritization. It's so common to see founders using their gut. This is absurd. Your gut is not logical. It is inherently biased. It might even be right most of the time. But that's worse because when it is wrong, you'll never see it coming. There is always a logical answer about which project to work on first. Even if you only have 10% confidence in a certain project, you should do that one before the project you have 5% confidence in, for example. And final point on ranking in abstract before we get into practicalities. There's a great little bonus you get by ranking, and that is that you're never saying no to anybody's project. All you're saying is not yet, which is much easier to let go of your pet project when you are agreeing to a framework and some goals which we've already put in place. Admittedly, if the project is ranked more than about third, it's almost certainly not going to get done, but there is at least a chance. So, how do I actually rank projects? I like to use ICE scores. ICE stands for impact, confidence, and ease. Impact is the impact we believe a project will have if it is successful. Confidence is the confidence we have of a project being successful. And ease is how easy will it be to complete a project. Let's run through an example. So say we wanted to improve the conversion rate of our sign-up flow. And one project idea we have is to redesign the sign-up flow from scratch. And the other idea we have is to change the color of our call to action buttons. So let's think about the impact. Well, redesigning the sign-up flow from scratch is definitely going to have a bigger impact than changing the color of those buttons. And what about confidence? Well, our current sign-up flow is pretty ugly and the UX is bad. It doesn't work very well. So we have pretty good confidence that a complete redesign is going to be successful. For switching the colors, well, there's some research that some color, can't remember which one it is, gives you a slight increase. But that might look ugly with our current flow, and so, you know, confidence isn't great there. And ease is self-explanatory. So which project should we do? Well, that's impossible to know because we have no idea what the goal is. And like I said, we can only prioritize against a goal. Certainly, if our goal is increasing our conversion by 0.1%, you're not going to catch me rebuilding a sign-up flow from scratch. Couple more quick points here before we get onto the worksheet. One is I like to use a heuristic, not numbers. So I say it's either high, medium, or low. The reason for that is because I want to actually have us make the decision, not rely on some implicit weightings that might actually not make sense for us. And the second point is if your confidence is low, totally fine. Just run a project designed to increase your confidence. So for example, say we were thinking of updating the tone of voice we use on the copy on our website. If we're not sure, if our confidence is low, we can just chuck up some landing pages, push some traffic at those pages, run an A/B test, and quickly we're going to have increased or decreased confidence and know whether or not we should push forward with that project. So I think this one is the other side of your worksheet. Yeah, that's true. So turn it over to the startup goal worksheet. And where it says objective, I want you to write your first objective from the North Star side, and then your key results from that, and then skip down to the bottom and write some project ideas. I want you to note if they're going to be discovery or delivery and rank them with a nice score. I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that. This one can take a bit of time, so if anyone's got any questions at this point, then this could be a good time to shout those out and we could talk about that. Yep. How we should do the scores, high, medium, and low. Because I don't like, if you use numbers, do you add them together? Or do you multiply them? Do you need weightings? What should the weightings be? I want you to make that decision yourself. One of the great things about this framework is that it allows you to compare a project from one end of your funnel to a project right at the other end, depending on what the goal is. And so it means you can get a high, medium, high, for example, rating for a project about churn, and maybe you get a medium, medium, low rating for a project about putting more people into the top of your funnel with ads or whatever it might be. And so the idea is about you being able to make that decision, and this being a tool to help you do that rather than just giving you the answer. Anything else? All right, I'm going to give you one more minute, and then we'll move on. All right. Well, now we've got goals, we have got a well-structured team, and we've got projects for that team to be working on. The missing piece of the puzzle is keeping track of everything we're doing and everything that we're learning. And if you follow this process, you're going to learn a lot, because that is the entire point. Our preferred method of keeping track is Trello, but ultimately you should use whatever makes sense for your organization. Ideally, it's something that models a Kanban board, much like Trello does. And so I'm going to talk about Trello, but it applies to other tools as well. We create a card for each project. So each of the little rectangles you see here is a project that we have decided to work on. There, as discussed, is one leader per project. That's that little face you can see, and we put that on the card so everyone knows who the leader is. We put the cards in columns based on the stage of the project. So you can see these ones are going to be done next, these ones are in progress, these ones are being measured, and this one's been done. And in each column, the cards are ordered by priority. So the next project that's going to be started is this one, and then it will be this one, and then it will be this one. And you can see that each project is linked back to our goals. And so this, you can see how this gives us that thing I talked about right at the start of the entire team. You can see what the goals are, what projects need to be worked on to hit those goals, and then within these projects, what tasks need to be done in order to complete the project. The magic is that this Trello board, or whatever you use, shows everything that your growth team is working on, in priority order, including the results that we got. Essentially, it's a snapshot in time of the current situation of everything. There's an awful lot of nuance in here in how to define your projects, and we actually have a few more columns than this, but you get the idea of what we're getting at. There is one thing I do want to draw your attention to, though, and that is this measuring column. A project stays in the measuring column until it has finished. We have our results, we know what we're going to do, and so that might be that the results were bad, we've got those conclusions, they're written up into the card, and we're going to cancel it. It might be that the project was great, and so we're going to define a new project to take it even further, or it might even be inconclusive, and we're just going to run another project, but alter our question slightly. When implementing this process, we like to maintain a weekly cadence of learning. We do 2 meetings a week. I'm going to talk about the minor one first because it's quick and I always forget if I don't. And so that one is a meeting we'll have towards the end of the week, talking about how the process itself is going. Are there any changes that we need to make based on the specific startup we're currently at? Or do we need to tweak our OKRs because they're not quite capturing the nuance, our goals, they're not capturing the nuance of what it is that we're trying to achieve? The second meeting, the major one, we call the growth meeting, or TGM. And that meeting involves every single person at your startup that is working on growth. In that meeting, we will talk through every single project in turn that has either been completed since the last meeting or has had any work done. And we'll talk about what we have learned. That's the important bit. Once you've discussed each project, go back and reprioritize the entire board based on the new things that you have learned this week. Sometimes you'll learn things that are so big that you'll have to rethink your OKRs. This is good and expected. Remember Steve Blank's definition, we're searching, and when you search, it's inevitable that sometimes you'll think you found something when actually you haven't. Working in this way gives you a lot of flexibility. It allows your entire company to pivot based on new information. There's a good example of this again at my last startup. And this was fairly early on, we were trying to sign up sports players. We had this hypothesis that in the UK, there's a lot of amateur football, soccer teams, and all of their web presence is terrible, and all the information that gets shown on there is terrible. And if we had that information, which we did, and we could publish pages for each one, we'd get lots of long-tail traffic, and we would be able to sign those people up. And the theory worked, except that they didn't sign up. Our conversion rate was around 0.1%, and this was way too low for the model. And so we talked about this in our next growth meeting and realized that this was now the highest priority thing for our entire company. And it was the same OKR as before, so we didn't have to rewrite, but this was the thing that we had to prove, otherwise we were dead in the water. And so what we did was create that project, put it to the top of the board, the highest priority, and our entire team worked exclusively on that project. This went on for a few weeks, and we would every day release new things, run A/B tests. It would incrementally improve, and eventually we hit upon the keys and we jumped to 18% conversion rate. And the only way we were able to achieve this is because we were able to identify that specific thing as the most important thing for the entire company and get our entire company to shift its focus. As it says, monthly OKR reviews are important. That's one of the big differences against some of the current OKR wisdom, which I think says every 3-ish months, every quarter. I think that's right. Again, we're not businesses, and so we shouldn't act like a business. If you find that you change your OKRs, that could well mean throwing away or at least stepping back from a lot of the things that you've been working on. This is okay and what you should do. If your OKRs change, any work towards an OKR that is no longer current is work that's taking you in the wrong direction. So be comfortable with walking away from projects that are no longer important for your company. Here are some suitably anonymized examples of this process working. Startups that we have worked with. The alignment's a bit messed up, but you get the point. So top one is a B2B2C prop tech company. There's been a 10x improvement in revenue growth since we started working with them. And we've had 30% month-on-month growth for the last 4 months. Second one, fintech B2B. We've got £2 million of annual spend without change in their growth rate. The way we were able to do this is because they were working on projects that notionally were about growth, but weren't specifically tied to the metrics that matter. This messaging app, this is our startup. Once we achieved product market fit, we grew at 45% a month, MAUs, it's 9% a week, for 9 months in a row. And finally, we've got a health B2C consumer app. That was it was the 3rd fastest growing startup in 2017 in the UK. We were behind the scenes there. The reason I put this up is that this method of thinking doesn't apply to a certain kind of startup. It's across the board because it is about how you make decisions and how you prioritize. They are the keys to growth. So let's recap. How to grow. Number 1, understand that you are a startup and not a business, or you are on that continuum somewhere. Number 2, set clear goals. Like I said, that is the most important thing. Think about what your goals are. Do they really correspond to that which you are trying to achieve? Prioritization is everything. And finally, work in multidisciplinary projects correlated to goals. That is it. Thank you very much. Like it says, we have some office hours available, my co-founder and I. A small amount over the next few weeks. So if you want to speak about how this can apply to your startup in detail, then do reach out. That is my email address. And it's something that we provide for free. I think we have some time for some questions.
Yes?
Anybody got any questions? Nothing. Literally no questions. 100% clear to everybody. Yeah.
Hi. What's the difference of using your goal approach definition to a SMART type of goals?
Not an awful lot. I am totally on board with SMART objectives, I think. For me, if a goal isn't SMART, then it's a complete waste of time. For me, that is the baseline of goals.
Okay, so if I should set up goals for a project using a SMART approach, would be fine.
That would be absolutely fine.
Okay.
Very important to, when you are defining a project, so you saw that list of projects, I could try and go back there, and every single one was defined as a question, which is important because this is the title that I'll put at the top of the Trello card and gives a really great idea about what that project is trying to achieve. And then inside, we will write some specific numbers that let us know once that project is complete. So it should be totally binary, like either the project is complete or incomplete. It has been a success or it has not been a success. And so, yeah, SMART objectives in that case totally work.
Thank you.
Yeah, oh, Mike, come in.
Hi, Tim.
Hi.
What I would like to know is what is the biggest difference in the growth process between a startup and a business? Because I currently work in a business and I was trying to kind of sort of apply all of this to what we are doing.
Totally understand. So, if you can work this way, then I think you should. See if you can carve out some resource on whether that is a percentage of people's time or a certain number of people and work in exactly this process. Because, like I said, the goal here is to learn things, because that is how you grow. Sure, like, you want to get more users or whatever, but actually, you need to learn how to get more users. And it's this process that's the most efficient. And so we talked about the structure of a business and the structure of an ideal startup. And as I said, the business structure is great at execution. It's also good at incremental improvement. But it doesn't leave room for leaps of understanding. And so even if it's just you, if you can work in this way where you are trying to identify the most important things to learn and working on specifically learning them rather than immediately achieving some new business model or some new insight, then I think that will stand you in good stead. Oh, yeah? I can hear you. That question was, how do you know when you've achieved product market fit and when is the time to start growing? And well, product market fit, I think, is fairly self-explanatory when you have achieved it. It is when suddenly, instead of fighting to acquire users or fighting to keep your users happy or fighting to keep your engagement up, suddenly that just starts working. In terms of the second part of your question, when to start growing, I need you to define growth, because what do you actually mean in that context? Yeah, okay, so good question. So ultimately you're saying, do you have to achieve product market fit before you start growing? And again, that depends on how you define growth, because if you define it as something that will move us towards finding our business model, then growth starts right at the beginning and keeps going ultimately forever. You can always keep refining your business model. If you define it as acquiring tons and tons of users, then sure, that may not make sense. The thing that really you need to focus on is figuring out the most important thing for you to learn. And if that is how to acquire users, then go all in on figuring that out. But if it's to do with your product or you've got a churn problem or whatever it is, identify that and work on that thing. Welcome. Anybody else? Yep. You've got a mic coming.
Okay. If you are not reaching the key results, what are you suggesting? To change the objectives or to lower the metrics?
It depends on why you have set those. Because say we are talking about what you need to raise your next round, you probably can't just move those numbers lower and then go to your investors and be like, no, it's fine. I've decided to aim for smaller goals. So in that case, if you are finding that it is impossible to achieve those things, then that's the time to go back to your non-negotiables and your mission and say, well, this approach isn't working. How else can we pivot around this point to solve whatever our mission and non-negotiables are in a different way? But if you want us to talk about specifics, I'm happy to dive into details if you're happy to share, but it's quite a general point.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I can repeat. Yeah.
Thank you. So, from your experience, how big should be the growth team? You know, in order to not be small enough, in order to don't have enough competencies, but not big enough.
Yes, so good question, and that depends on.
Should it grow when the business, when the startup grows, or?
Yeah, exactly. So if you're very small, often you might have growth people. It's probably your entire startup, apart from a small amount of someone's or some people's time to do that BAU, pay the bills, whatever. But the ideal growth team is a cross-functional team so it's got maybe some dev resource and some design resource and sales and BI and whatever else you might need for your specific startup. And so rather than necessarily making that team bigger and having 5 of every function, what makes more sense is to have more teams. And so each team will be working on a project, and so you can be working on many projects at the same time. So maybe you've got one growth team working on this project and another one working on this one, and so on and so forth. But what you generally, practically how it works out is you have leaders and people are splitting their time based on the requirements of each project. And so say you've got a designer and that's your design resource and he is jumping around the projects and splitting his time based on the priority order of the projects. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Welcome.
Last call, any other question?
Yes. Just got in there.
Thank you. Does this framework apply also to services, not necessarily software as a service, but to services, not products?
Absolutely. It applies to any kind of organization where you are trying to find out things that you don't know. To summarize, it is a way to productize innovation. It's about systematically building a team of people that can turn things that you don't know into things that you do know. And so it applies to any kind of business. It applies to super early stage and super late stage, and even organizations where you're not even trying to make money, but you're trying to find out information. This is how I would want to structure a team.
Okay, thank you.